And here we go. All right. Hi, guys. How's it going? Welcome to the show. Alex, welcome back. Haven't seen you in a few weeks. Glad to have you back on. And Andy's with us finally, which I am very excited about. The one other person in London who I get to talk to. How are you guys doing today?
I'm having a
Good.
great day. I am. I've actually done some work this morning, which is unusual.
Surprise.
Sorry.
I don't think you're supposed to tell me that,
No,
Andy.
no, exactly. I do work every day. Yeah.
Definitely. That's what we do. Yeah, so just to note, me and Andy sit under Alex. Alex is our boss. So everything's very formal today. We have to be very serious. Never. Awesome. Okay, let's get into it. So, welcome everyone to the Keys to AWS Optimization, the show where we share stories, concepts, and solutions to help you unlock your cost optimization at AWS. My name is Stephanie Gooch, and I'm a commercial architect at AWS, and I look after telco customers. And today, I'm just going to say I've had a really good day. So, I've had some great customer meetings. So, if you're the customers I spoke to today, well, you did really good. So, because some of them said they might watch. So, I'm just saying welcome.
And I am Alex Head, and I lead the optics team that Andy and Steph sit on, which covers all of our largest strategic industries for AWS, saving our customers money and making them more efficient.
Awesome. And with us today is Andy. So Andy's in our team. He's also a commercial architect. Andy, do you want to give a brief kind of 1-minute origin story of who you are and what you do at AWS?
Yep. Hi, everyone. Andy Brown here. I'm based out of London, if you couldn't guess from my accent. And I've been at Amazon now for 2 years as a commercial architect supporting our global automotive customers. Before Amazon, I did 10 years working for a Swiss investment bank, many different roles there. Some of them I was part of when the bank was trying to decide which cloud provider to go with, if there was any other cloud providers out there. And and then I was then put on an application, which was the Pioneer application, onto the cloud and doing hands-on optimization. So I was doing right sizing, I was doing auto scaling, I was dealing with Spot. So my experience before I came here was very much hands-on keyboards, doing optimization. And now I can tell everyone all the mistakes I made and how not to do it how I used to.
Nice, thanks. So Andy has got tons of experience. He was my buddy when I first came to AWS. So really, really glad to have him on the show. And as you can tell from our kind of pun-ish name, we're going to be talking about his experience with his customers driving down costs. So we're going to focus on customer stories and how he's been able to take customers from kind of the start, first interactions, all the way to being optimized. As always, please send us questions, comments in the chat. We want to know what you're doing in the world of cost optimization, anything you'd like to ask us with the experience that we have, and just any kind of questions around cloud financial management. So let's get into it. So Andy, do you want to talk a bit more about the customers that you work with and what type of companies they are, apart from being automotive?
Yeah. So I deal with the largest automotive companies out there on AWS. So it could be anything from our traditional manufacturers to who actually makes the cars to the people who are like transforming the automotive business. So there's a lot of conversation on connected car platforms, autonomous driving, and how can you do this cost efficient? Because they haven't done this before. They haven't had a car driving itself down the road with all that data coming in from the different sensors. And so AWS is a perfect solution for doing this and drawing this out. But how do you make sure your costs are controlled with this amount of data coming in? So one moment could be talking about digitizing a production plant to dealing with IoT data and the best ways of managing that.
So pun somewhat intended. Let's go on a journey. Let's
Drive on a journey.
Yeah, let's drive on a journey. Thank you, Alex. Where should people start when it comes to kind of cloud financial management? And Alex, feel free to as well jump in, especially with your experience when you started with the Weather Channel and also building out optics. What do you guys see as the key points people should start when they start with cloud financial management?
I think. Oh, you go first, Alex. You go first, Alex.
I'll add in first because I was actually asked this in a customer meeting yesterday, and I had a point answer: visibility. You should see the data, make sure that everyone is looking at the same source of the data, to even start the conversation. You don't know where attention needs to be. You don't know where you need to get more granularity until you have a place where you're going to get that visibility. And maybe that's Cost Explorer, maybe that's the Cost Intelligence dashboard, maybe that's one of our amazing third-party partners like Cloud Health, Cloudability, Cloud Checker, Cloudit. But that is the absolute first step when, in my opinion, in talking anything on the CFM journey.
Yeah, completely agree. And actually, this is where one of my recent customer engagements fits into this perfectly. So they are a connected car platform. They make connected car platforms for the individual manufacturers. Yeah, I was like, what's Steph gone?
Can I just say?
Andy kept it going. He kept it going. No pause.
This is like I don't know how many episodes, and I've got a Mac, and this is the only time I've ever like swiped backwards, and it's never happened before. So just like it's only ever happened that someone's been on mute once, it's like the very few times. All right, sorry, I interrupted. Continue.
No, so this is connected car platform, makes it for the individual manufacturers. Actually, I use the app myself for my own car. For example, the one thing I use the most of this feature is it will tell me if my car's unlocked or not. The number of times I walked away from my car in the parking lot and I was like, oh, did I actually lock it? And luckily the app will tell me. It tells me like stuff about how much fuel I have left, if I need to take it for service. But it's really trying to put the data of the driver of the car, having all that car data available to them in their phone. They were given a challenge by their senior leaders. Their senior leaders were given a challenge to reduce the cost of this platform to a certain amount per car. And this is all they were given. And the number they were given was something very ambitious. It was designed to be a challenge for them on how to do this. And it wasn't just going to be achieving this by cost cutting and cost optimization. There was other things in place, like they're going to be growing their business, they're going to be deploying new features and technology, but optimizing their spend was one of the key areas. And so they engaged me, they came to me saying, oh, we've been given this goal, can you help us? And so my first question was, okay, well, how much does it cost per car today? And they didn't know. And that's like the very first thing. It's exactly what Alex just said, was visibility. They needed visibility in what they're spending on AWS today to be able to identify how much are they already spending per car, but also compare, because each of them were individual programs. Each manufacturer they were deploying their application for was treated separately. So they were able to review all these different programs and say, okay, this manufacturer is more expensive, this one's cheaper, why? And it's just having that visibility. So the AWS Cost Explorer, we used a lot with them. We also deployed the Cost Intelligence dashboard as well, really to try and improve this visibility so they can know what is the problem they're having to deal with now, and also where their costs will be in the future. Luckily in my space, and this is where things come very easy in my space, we can always talk about how much does it cost per car, or per message from a car coming in, or per user of the app. But obviously, if you don't run an automotive company, doing the price per car is not always most useful.
Maybe not.
So, yeah. But do you have any metrics in like telco space they like to measure for trying to track this area?
Well, we were talking about this morning, so I actually called Andy about this subject earlier because a customer of mine is moving into the optimization space, and they know they want to measure it, but they don't know what to measure. And so I kind of brought this up with them, and they at the moment are more, rather than having anything to pinpoint, like it's not per phone, they're just going to start with the basics, which is things like unit cost. So compute unit cost and storage unit cost. So they have something to benchmark. And then once they get more intricate, then they can start doing it. But yeah, I suggested that to them and they liked that idea, Andy. So thank you for your help this morning.
Steph, you kind of built out the CFM practice in your previous role. Where did you start? Was it at that visibility? Was it like finding that metric that you wanted to target? Where did you start?
So a big part was cost visibility. It was before I think the cost intelligence dashboard existed, unfortunately. So I just made a very bad dashboard in my quick site just so I could see costs. But yeah, it was getting access to the curve. That was something that somebody had set up beforehand, and they didn't have resource ID, and it was like a daily one rather than hourly. It was like set up in the worst way, and it was also in CSV, so it was really hard to ingest. So setting up the cost and use report was number one, to be able to get that visibility. And then a really kind of similar aspect of this kind of per car unit we had was charging out individual applications. So things like working out how much people were spending on Jira licenses, but it was, Jira for their kind of project tracking, and understanding, okay, how much does a license cost? How much does the infrastructure cost? How much does the backup? How much does time cost with people? And pulling all that information into Athena and then running some reports off that. So kind of using infrastructure plus license plus time was the best metrics that we came up with, I think. But yeah, that was a fun challenge back in the day. And
fun.
Yeah, fun. I look back, it was good. I enjoyed it. And if we're talking about the unit cost as well, there's a good blog that you can see to do that. Okay, so once you established this goal of what was your unit cost, where did you go from there? How did the customer and you engage with the rest of the company?
So the thing with AWS is we charge you every hour. And so the moment we can stop doing costs and start reducing the costs, the better it is for them. And so we started with the simple things. We used AWS Trusted Advisor, and we looked at what unattached EBS volumes do you have, what unused IP addresses you have out there. All these things where they're not even being used. So and especially when the things aren't unattached, they can't even be used. So let's delete them, clean them up, work out why they got there first, and let's save money immediately. And then we can start talking about what's the longer term things you can be doing. So Trusted Advisor first, and then we started moving on to more interesting topics.
Andy, before
sorry.
Before driving further into this journey, who is your audience here? Like, who did it start with, and then how did you? Because I assume that who the starting audience wasn't necessarily the people that were doing the cleanup.
Yeah, good point, actually. So the very first meeting I had with the customer was we tried to engage all the key stakeholders and bring them to the room. So we actually brought 3 key people in. We brought in the program manager, so the person who was overall responsible for the whole product they were delivering and also the relationship to their own customers. We brought in the technology manager, the person deciding which technology they're deploying. So are they going serverless? Are they going containers? Who makes that decision? And we also brought in their finance team, because the finance team was the one who's going to be ultimately tracking that. They're going to be achieving this goal. They have to do multi-year forecasts for their own reporting purposes. So we tried to get all of those. Actually, we didn't try. We did get all those people into a room together. And we started brainstorming on them on how we're going to achieve this. How do they do their roadmap, for example? How do they deploy new features today? So how do we make sure that when they're deploying a new feature, cost optimization is also another feature they can be deploying in this sprint? Also, we want to know how are they tracking the costs? We see costs from our side, but we're not their business. They might see their costs on AWS quite differently. So how are they actually tracking which costs are in scope, which ones are out of scope, what all these moving parts, just so we're really on the customer side and understanding what they need to see and achieve. But also bringing that technology person is to understand what are they planning to do already. So with this customer, they were already doing some lifts and shifts onto AWS. They already had a plan to move some of their workload across to serverless. So we worked out, okay, when is this happening? If this is happening by this date, we'll focus on it when we get to that date. And we'll focus on everything else which won't be transformed first.
Yeah. I have 2 questions. One is the question that's in the chat, so I'll do that one in a second. But the other one, so we always talk about, and this is to both of you, I guess, and first Andy, we always talk about the concept of bringing in together the finance, the devs, and the stakeholders. We preach that. We'll probably talk a lot about it in our next episode with the JR from FinOps Foundation, because that's a classic example. That's what you should do. But when you start having that conversation, how did you start the actual meeting? Because I always find it interesting, because you can't jump in and say, right, we're going to talk about Lambda functions, because the finance person might be like, what are you talking about? And so what was the way? Did you kind of go from a level 100, 200, 300, or did you go from a business point of view? How did you start that conversation?
We started from their business point of view to begin with. We wanted to understand, where did this goal come from, how they were thinking they were going to be achieving it already, how they also rank themselves in this process. That question I said earlier, what's your price per car today? Just trying to see how they judge themselves on how they're going to do this. And then we started with the 100 level, very much, okay, this is where we're going to start. This is the best practice on how we're going to do it. And these are all the questions we need to find out from you and work out. So start from, as always with AWS, we start from the customer and we work back from them. So we start from their problem, we found out what their problem and how they're seeing it, and then we start building up that foundation. In these meetings, we did not talk about the difference between using Lambda or containers. That was not the point of these meetings at all. It was very much, who do we need to get involved to make sure that this became a key part of their everyday working life going forwards?
What about you, Alex? Have you had any good meetings like that? Any tips?
I mean, I think I echo a lot of kind of what Andy says of, I mean, every customer and every meeting is unique. Every meeting that we have just as a team is different. And it's kind of about reading the priorities first and then diving into what level that means. And, you know, in Andy's view, they had a very strong priority from like an executive top-down level. And so I think you've got to start with that overall view. I am curious, Andy, though, when you're looking at this, because essentially as this application or, you know, it will scale, like it will grow, it will have more users, and in return, that could also decrease the cost. Is that brought into the calculation that you're doing for this optimization journey?
Yes, exactly. That is one of the key ways that actually going to save money. Luckily, made my job a lot easier. But it was once again, they didn't even predict this. They weren't able to look into. They didn't have the data available to them right now to be able to say, okay, we expect by the end of the year we're going to have X number of cars, and so this will be the cost per platform. They also weren't aware of how their costs would vary. So there's certain costs like the networking cost, which will be very fixed, doesn't matter number of cars, but Lambda costs will change if you have more workload. And so that was one thing we started to realize. And so we knew when we were looking at the costs and visibility, we also needed them to try and work out, okay, this one grows over time, this one doesn't. But you're right. And that's what I was saying. It's like they weren't expecting to achieve this goal purely through optimization. There was a lot of other things going into it, of which optimization was a key part, but not the only part. And just general growth and economy of scales was one of their key ways to save money in this area.
Nice. So I guess just to summarize for those, so we're obviously talking from an AWS point of view, we all work there, but for everybody who's in a company, don't laugh, when it comes for being inside your company, you're probably thinking from a different point of view. So if you have a goal in mind, when you go into that meeting, make sure you include everybody else's goal. I know when I first started in kind of cloud financial management, I knew that I wanted to save money for the company, but that might not have been the goal for some of the other project managers. It might have been more about like an optimization or taking advantage of new services, things like Graviton. So make sure when you have those discussions internally to ask the questions to the rest of your peers and those important people. So we've got a question in the comments. So for those of us who might have joined, we're talking about Andy is our guest today from our team, and we're driving down costs. So we're talking about customer stories of kind of how to get started at using his experience for where he's been able to help the automotive industry save money. So please feel free to pop in questions and comments in the chat. So why does AWS think cost optimization is so important for customers? Why do they care? Alex, do you want to take a stab at this?
Yes, I want to take this one because it's the whole reason that I have a job and that I got to hire the amazing people on this call. It's a huge priority for AWS. If people aren't using our services and our platforms efficiently, then why would they want to continue to use them? And why would they want to continue to innovate on them and grow? So in our view, you know, helping the customer be more efficient and optimize their environment helps them become more comfortable with what they're doing. It helps earn that trust so that we can partner further in the future, and also opens up more opportunity to do new things on AWS. You know, if we save, you know, if Andy hits this awesome goal with his customer, they're going to want to bring their next application on AWS. And it's always going to be different for each customer, which is why our team exists. Like if we could say, hey, go optimize, here's the playbook, then that'd be one thing. But because AWS is always coming out with new and new features, new products, new services, that's always changing. We've talked a ton about Graviton on this show. We've had special guests about it. This time last year, that wasn't as much of a topic that we were talking about. And I think this time last year, I talked a lot about infrequent access on S3. So it's always changing, and we want to make sure that our customers know where to get that information and how to utilize it to save money and be more efficient.
Definitely. I know when I was a customer, I cared about cost. So I think they still do now. So let's put it back to our conversation on the kind of automotive industry. Andy, what did they actually do to save money? Let's go into some granular bits. I think some of these things we might have touched on before, but give us the highlights reel of what was the biggest impact in cost optimization with them.
So like I mentioned, they did use Trusted Advisor to do that initial cleanup first. But once things were cleaned up and they put the controls in place to make sure they get alerted when it happens again, we then started moving on to, like you said, the more interesting topics. Some of it was just simple modernization. Like Alex was just mentioning, we are always changing in this space. So they were doing the GP3 modernization for their EBS storage, their block storage, which was only announced a year ago now. But companies are still migrating and catching up on this and saving up to 20% by doing this. But same with their EC2 environments. But one thing we noticed with them specifically was they managed their snapshots in a unique way to make sure that each of their individual programs had secure backups of their environments and secure backups environment, and also they own their own snapshots. And so they weren't able to use the native AWS snapshot lifecycle policy features we have available to them. And so we help them craft the one which works exactly for them and helps them keep their backups, keep things secure, but also making sure they're not keeping every single backup from the last 2 years when they don't need to. But really, it was very much just trying to focus on their in-play, what are they already using on AWS, and could they use it more efficiently? But then we started to realize, okay, we're getting to the end of this and we still need to save money, and we're trying to work out what's next. A lot of their a lot of their workload was very much what I call standard AWS, EC2 compute instances, storage, RDS databases, and we're trying to work out, okay, how do we modernize you even further? Like, how do we move you to containers or to Lambda and serverless to save them even more money? And the easiest way of doing it was we looked in their environment and we saw that there was already a team doing this. We saw there was already a team using API gateway with the messages going into Lambda functions to be processed. And so we just connected them. We got people talking, saying, look, we know you're doing this. We can see the price per car because we now have the visibility in the cost intelligence dashboard to show us the price per car. We could see that it would save them money overall. So why don't you two teams talk and work out how do you get there and work out what you need to do it? And so it's that thing, is like when you're working and trying to optimize, it's not trying to just think about, oh, this is what is my team doing and what I need to do. If you're trying to do something different or you want to know where to go next, like speak to the other teams in your organization or speak to the other companies you have been connected to. If you're part of like a private equity terms, see if there's another firm you can go talk to, like company out there who could maybe share you best practices. Or even the FinOps Foundation is another area to try and get people connected.
I want to emphasize I want to emphasize too on that last point, Andy. I think that's something we haven't really talked about on the show yet. But one of the reasons that when hiring the team, I made it industry specific. So you work with auto, Steph works with telco. Michael Biddle, who's the other host on the show, works with strategic customers. It's because of that exact thing. What are other customers similar that look like you doing? And you don't need us to do that. You know, the networking and the possibilities around that. And I personally think that things like the FinOps Foundation, which Steph can go into, we'll talk more on the next episode, are a great way to find people who are in that world. And also just like people in the chat here and, you know, attending workshops and things like that at reInvent, you get that networking to, know more people in your space, but also say, you know, what's working for you and what's working for me.
Yeah, definitely. And also to shout out the Peer Connect, which happened yesterday. I think there's one in 2 weeks. So join that. So you can go into they'll always have. That's an AWS hosted event that will have speakers, that are customers that are sharing their stories, and then breakout rooms. So you can actually go and have conversations with those people and ask questions, which I think is a really useful way. And it's all about the peers. It's about people using Amazon. It's not necessarily people like us trying to talk to you about how to optimize. It's like real life stories that they've done. So, and I was going to touch on one more thing, two more things. One, which is going back to, this is a while ago, what Andy said about Trusted Advisor. This is a bit of a plug, but at the moment, a really good way of seeing your Trusted Advisor data is using there's a dashboard that we have in well-architected labs. It's a Trusted Advisor one. So pop into the cost intelligence section and you'll see the Trusted Advisor dashboard. And now, using a lab that we've developed, you can automate the data collection for Trusted Advisor. So if you have a very large organization, and this has actually happened in one of the calls I had today, that is super large organization, they don't have time to go into every single individual account and look at it. And they also want a way of being able to share grouped metrics. So they want to make sure that these accounts that are all grouped under one manager can then see all of their recommendations. Using this dashboard and using the account collector information that's connected to this, you can automate that and kind of spread that information out so everyone can see it without having to loop into all the different accounts. So just wanted to flag that. And so we talked, and you mentioned obviously the normal ways of saving money, snapshots, EBS. How do you find, and how do you guys like to think outside the box when it comes to these customer conversations? So things that aren't the normal basic kind of cost up.
Yeah, I think it's all about the questions that you're asking, right? So we have the cleanup, we've gone through different things that we see customers doing. Think outside of, okay, what service can we optimize, but more what the conversation Annie's having. What application can we optimize? What does this do? What is the end result? Like, what is our goal when we built this? And really asking yourself the uncomfortable questions that maybe you're not going to love the answer to, but that leads to thinking outside the box. And I think leads to more customer journeys similar to what Andy's talking about, because we're thinking in longer terms instead of what exact service are you using and things like that, because that can change on a day-to-day basis. I mean, we could release something and you change the entire application. And so those tricky questions, and I'm sure Andy has some good ones that he's asked customers to kind of think outside the box, that you can utilize and at your customer as well.
And like actually example, on actually Monday this week, I was speaking with a customer where the question they came to us is, are we mature on AWS? And they wanted us to like try and work out how they mature. But really the actual question is like, why do they care if they're mature on AWS? Like, which is like a funny thing to ask, but it's like, okay, what is the outcomes you want to get from this? Okay, when we got to it, their outcome was they wanted their developers to spend time developing features rather than managing infrastructure. And so, with the aim that if they could develop more features, then they will be able to release their product faster. And so that's where the conversation then starts, where we say, okay, how do we get your developers releasing features faster? And how do we make sure that then they're not spending less time on infrastructure? And so it's going back to that, okay, what is you actually trying to achieve? Mm-hmm. Ignoring not like, okay, if you speak to customers, they'll say, oh yeah, I like to be more efficient on EC2. But like being more efficient on EC2 is okay, but how does that help you? How does that benefit you? And so going back to how does it help you? Then working from there is a good way to try and find out like those things which aren't the standard solutions for these type of things.
Yeah, definitely. The customer call I had today, they were saying that their kind of account teams don't really care about costs because quote unquote daddy's paying for it was the line that they used, which I thought was hilarious, and I kept referring to it the whole call. So, and I was like, yeah, okay, so how do you measure the projects? Like, how's a good migration? And they're like, if it's live, it's good. They don't touch it and it's fine. And I was like, well, why don't you start to introduce this idea of measuring things like the unit cost and measuring how it's going, and then it's showing that if you can kind of keep things optimized, like you've built out a good solid infrastructure, and then you have more money to spend on other people and things like that. So it all comes in swings and roundabouts. It's nice, just a nice comment in the chat I'm going to share. It's great to hear real examples of how to start optimizing. Every cost journey is different. Exactly. Every journey. I was trying to think of another car pun, but I've just feel like I only had two and I've ran out. Next time I need to be better prepared.
Take the wheel and start optimizing.
Oh my God, she's done it. Right, with that, we will leave you with that excellent fun. Next week, we will be talking to JR from the FinOps Foundation, which we've mentioned a few times. So join there to learn more about the foundation and about how to get involved in what they offer. And have a good week, guys. Thanks, Andy, for joining, and see you all here next week.
Bye.
Bye.